Hello, I'm Ann Tracy with Blandin on Broadband. I'm excited to have a conversation today with the founding team of Smart North Collaboration. We are talking here. You can wave as I say your name. We've got Ben Wallace, Minify Energy. We've got Sakina from City Life. Saxina, I knew I would do that. Tom Fisher from the University of Minnesota at the School of Architecture. So it's such a good time to talk about this. I think that we're all learning about the need to be smarter. As we're having this conversation, we are looking at Texas having weather like Minnesota, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're learning that we need to be smarter. So I'm going to hand it off to you guys to talk more about Smart North.
Great. Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sharing a few slides, and that'll kind of be our discussion guide for today. And please interrupt us if you have any questions, because you know your audience.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I have to get my PowerPoint up, not my. Give me a moment. We should be up. Okay, there we go.
Nice.
So yeah, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Smart North, because it's a new partnership and collaboration that we've just formed over the last. It's been brewing for 3 years, I would say, and Tom and Ben would support that. But we really kind of decided to launch this in the middle of the pandemic last year, just seeing how more dependent our lives were becoming on technology and the access to it and the non-access to it, and how, whether it was healthcare or education or working from home. So we really used the opportunity last year, lessons learned through the pandemic, that there is an opportunity for us to leverage technology in new and different, meaningful ways, almost because it's going to be centerpiece of our lives. So really, our charter is we are looking forward to transforming livability as a core thesis for Smart North in the coming years in the northern region, starting with Minnesota, and that's where our focus is. With that, let me kind of delve into, so we are kind of, as we were thinking about it, we really began talking about how can we build just not a better, a new normal, because we don't know what the new is going to be, but how can we make it better for everyone? Because we've seen all the inequities and, because of the lack of technology and how it's taken away opportunities from people, especially in the pandemic year, but also all the racial justice conversations. And Minnesota has become the eye of the world from that perspective too. So a unique moment in time for all of us to really reimagine the kind of cities we want in our region, that everybody can live and thrive in, businesses, people, whoever. It's also an opportunity for us to leverage our rich ecosystem of civic, government, academic, innovation, enterprise resources, and local assets that we have across Minnesota. And I learned a lot. Ben and I have been attending the Arrowhead ICF webinars, and it's a great learning experience for us, because there's so much already happening and it's so asset rich. And how do we really leverage all of that for the betterment of all our communities? And finally, how do we harness the technology to really, as a great equalizer? So we've talked about equity and equal opportunities, but we really believe that technology is the great equalizer in the years to come, and Smart North wants to play a big role in making that happen. So founding, a word about all of us, the founding members are actually a very special mix of people. We have innovators, we have entrepreneurs, Ben and myself. We have Tom Fisher, who is an innovator, a thought leader from the University of Minnesota, and leads up the Minnesota Design Center for them. We have Tracy Notstom and Diane Rucker, who are from the Towerside Innovation District, which is already reinventing stormwater management, energy innovation, etc. Yeah. We have Jason Barnett, who's worked in the the smart light area. But the exciting part is that I think between Tom, myself, and Ben, we are the upper half of the age group. But what we've really done intentionally is bring in the youth, because we believe that the next generation really needs to become a part of this thinking process and making the change. So you will see Amun, who's a Stanford fellow and works at Snap Inc. You'll see Teo Daniel, Will Preble, Dalton. All of them are entrepreneurs in their own right, very steeped into this mission that we've all carved out for ourselves. So a little bit about our charter, right? So as we've had lots of conversations, we are very clear that this can't happen by itself. Like, this group of people cannot do it by ourselves. And there's so much good work already happening. So we've viewed from the get-go Smart North as a public-private civic partnership, coalition, collaborative, every word applies to it, working together to really make the northern region the most livable region in America. So we've had a lot of support for kind of really going out there and putting a big lofty vision. It's about transformational change. It's not about incremental change. And that's what we want to do. And we want to do this through the use of smart technologies, intelligent design, and data, right? And that's really our differentiator. There are a lot of collaboratives doing a lot of good work, but we really want to bring in the technology conversation in this whole redesign, reimagining, journey that we are all on in together. And the role that Smart North wants to play is to be that balanced and trusted advisor, partner, connector, and resource for the region and its communities. So that's really our charter, as we've gone on this path. And the 4 areas of impact, just to keep it simple, I mean, each of these areas is so big and wide and deep, but just at a very high level, the 4 areas of impact that we want to make are in the area of digital and tech equity and driving innovation. And this is just not about access. For example, in Northeast Minnesota, there's a lot of work happening around broadband. That's really the first starting point. There is no conversation happening on technology without the access and broadband. But then the other aspect of it is how, having access is not enough. You need to have the devices, you need to have the skill set. And it's about the youth as much as it's about the elders using technology to access medical health. If you're living in a rural community, you don't have access to hospitals just down the road, right? You have to, especially in today's time. So it's about how do you not only make the skill availability, the training, the education for communities, and make almost like community tech support centers, and we talk about that, but also driving innovation. That will become the turning point. Then, of course, changing the city infrastructure to become more digital, accessible anywhere, anytime, and connecting all the data points. Our cities work in silos, and that's not helping everybody or anyone. So how do we kind of create that change there, and how can we support that? Healthy and happy neighborhoods, and this is a big lofty goal too. We talk about blue and green spaces, we talk about connectivity, we talk about smart health, smart street lights, we talk about a full complete neighborhood, etc. And it has different connotations if you're talking about an urban, rural, or peri-urban kind of neighborhood. So we understand all that and want to play in all that in those areas. And then at the bottom line really is, how is all this change restorative, sustainable, and resilient? All the development that's going to happen, or the change that's going to happen, how do we keep that as a continued sustainable effort and initiatives, both in terms of giving back to the environment and making the gaps good, which existed in our society, but also how do we engage the community to make it sustainable for a long term? Smart North will come and go, for example, other entities will come and go, but there are 2 connotations here of sustainability here that I wanted to kind of highlight. And just a quick picture of saying, this is where we want to have the Smart North impact. It sits at the intersection of the quality of life of small businesses, the residents of a community or a city, the economic impact and socioeconomic actually impact and innovation, and then the environmental benefits from a long-term perspective. Tom and Ben, please, jump in if you have any comments and additional remarks to make, because That's only just making it richer. So really our initial focus from a Smart North perspective has been twofold, actually fourfold. We want to do four things. One is our lofty big goal is to make all the northern communities in Minnesota region or in the northern region the most livable places in the US, right? We want to create templates for replication. So we are looking at a cluster approach of saying how initially can we work with communities or neighborhoods or cities which are one urban, one peri-urban, and one rural. So we can start our journey with creating templates. Hey, this can happen. Each one of them are very different, but they need the same resources from a technology perspective for the same reasons, but how they get wired up is going to be very different and unique. The other one is really talk about smart city initiatives already happening in Minnesota. How do we educate and showcase and share and become a platform for the local work happening in this region? And then bring in people from across the country or even the globe where we can adapt and for relevant examples and projects that are happening elsewhere that we can adapt and borrow from. Then building an ecosystem and marketplace of Minnesota-based resources, because we want this region to grow. We want to attract talent, capital, and jobs around the work that we are going to, we want to do here. And then, of course, our continuing platform will be forging partnerships, expanding and strengthening strengthen our work as we go down this path. And having been a part of the Arrowhead region and ICF webinars, it has been so rewarding and so valuable that we one of the asks that we make in the end of this presentation is really about partnerships. We really want to get to know people who are working in the broader Minnesota region outside the Twin Cities to be able to strengthen and expand our work. I'm going to pause here and see, Ben, if you have any comments to make here. Otherwise, we can go into the next piece.
Thanks. No, I think you're covering it well. Just the origin of Smart North was really us bringing people together who weren't aware of each other's activities and seeing all these pockets and just connecting those folks, bringing them together to foster collaboration is really a lot of the drive. So having engaged now with the Blandin Foundation, looking at the connectivity and the grant, the innovation and equity activities around the state, and particularly in Arrowhead region, I think it's a wonderful complement for Smart North, and I'm interested in exploring how we partner on other projects moving forward. So Sapina, you're doing great. Keep going. I'll just chime in if I think I can add value somewhere.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So just quickly, I want to make sure that, so I'm just going to go, we've begun some work, right? And we wanted to start with who can we work with, which communities are ready and see the change here and now. And we've been fortunate enough to get some engagement from the 30th in Chicago, neighborhoods in Minneapolis through the founding team members who are engaged there already to really start making this difference. So we are totally excited about that. I think it is a multi-level opportunity for us to reimagine a neighborhood in many different ways. And if we can even make a small contribution, it's worth and very valuable. The second one is the Towerside Innovation District, which I talked about. It straddles Minneapolis and St. Paul, but it also has peri-urban. It's peri-urban. It's not really urban, but that's our opportunity to reimagine a city or a community of the future, and as they're building it out. And for the rural, I want to call this out loud and clear that we are scouting now for partnerships with communities or cities in rural Minnesota. And through this Arrowhead conversation, I'm hoping we can find that partner sooner than later. So this is a big call out and shout out for that. And we know that there's a recognized need. So we have a very simple criteria, and it's all, it's on the deck right now. It was loud and clear for us, there is a need for technology. It's not broadband as a starting point, but then how do we build on top of that to really re-innovate, reimagine, and reinvigorate the economies of rural Minnesota for the future. So, one of the sidebars, which I was really happy to hear about, is that how do we attract the younger families and young people to move further up north in rural Minnesota, but they'll only come if they have the opportunities, whether it's entrepreneurship or education or innovation innovation or something around that that will help them choose those communities and cities. The other kind of initiatives that we are getting engaged, just to give a flavor of the kind of work that we will get engaged in or would like to get engaged in and support communities and cities is safety commission. Like, in St. Paul, we have an opportunity to kind of work with them on various different things. We are working with them on the safety commission for the St. Paul city, which is about how do, with all the racial unrest that happened last year about, the unjust police behavior. And, I don't want to talk about that, it become very politicized, but is there a way of saying when a 911 calls comes for a non-violent incident, there could be other agencies who could, work on that. And in fact, Tom is working on a project that kind of addresses that. So that's a very interesting piece of work. The second one is smart street lighting is really the starting point of any smart city project worldwide. But we were viewing the smart street lights as actually technology hubs, which could have 5G nodes for connectivity. It has, IoT sensors for air quality or, just sensing the traffic and energy efficiency, and a lot of, autonomous cars, electric vehicle charging stations. So they become kind of almost like technology hubs in the middle of neighborhoods, but pretty looking ones. Hopefully we can make that. And then also getting engaged, which I found very relevant to the conversations happening in the Arrowhead webinars over the last couple of weeks, is around around innovation and job innovation and work innovation, economic innovation. And we've gotten engaged in those conversations, So this is a very urban St. Paul kind of based conversation, but it gives you a flavor of the kind of work that we can do across any of these, regional cities. So that's kind of a flavor here. Tom, would you like to comment a little bit on the Safety Commission work that you are doing? Not the Safety Commission, but the whole idea of using AI?
Yes, we just got a National Science Foundation grant at the university to basically reimagine the 911 emergency response system and utilizing artificial intelligence, machine learning as an aid to emergency responders so that we can respond to situations with the appropriate personnel and give responders a better sense of what the situation is and how best to respond. So that project is just starting.
Great, thank you.
So, sorry, do you mind if I ask just a little bit more about that program? So do you still have live operators answering the phone, or is it kind of more of a systemized?
There would still be live operators, but in the same way that, for example, physicians now have artificial intelligence aids to help them in diagnosis with patients. So you still have the doctor, but you have these artificial intelligence backups to give you a broader sense of what's possible. So yes, there would still be a person at the end of that line, but that person would have, through artificial intelligence, a better sense of what's actually going on. We also hope to integrate it with other information like sensors that might give the responder a sense of what's actually happening on the street or in the location. So trying to give emergency responders more information and a better sense of how to respond.
So almost like an augmented reality, possibly.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, I want to bring in here the smart street stuff, because supposing if you have smart street lights and there was an incident in the neighborhood, the lights could become brighter to shine literally a light on the incident at that moment in time to give better visibility. So yeah. So let's go. So, from a Smart North engagement framework, and this is just our out of the door approach to how we want to do things. I think the first thing which we hold very, very dear and feel is very important is the community engagement aspect and the discovery aspect. We are starting with the belief that every community, every neighborhood has assets. It has, some liabilities. It has some needs. It has some dreams. And how do we engage with these communities at really the grassroots level, and with the youth and the leaders and the elderly, and really identify what is required before we really go forward. And this is when you work at a neighborhood level. At a city level, again, like as I'm working for the tech committee for the St. Paul Workforce Innovation Board, one of the things we're talking about is the multi-generational neighborhoods, and we need to cater to everybody in that neighborhood, just not one set of people or the other set of people. So that's the engagement part. And then really help get that data and inputs, and then help them redesign and dream about what this can look in the future, and create like a roadmap and a blueprint with the dream team supporting that. Who will be the dream team from the neighborhood who can support that, and how can we resource this? And then, of course, identify and curate solutions and companies who can be brought in, because one of the places where there's so many things happening from a technology perspective, but which are the right companies? How do you identify them? How do you work with them? That's another area where we want to bring in our our expertise and our experience. But also, how do we also use local resources? We have so many entrepreneurs and new companies in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, in the rural Minnesota, that need to become a part of this puzzle and problem solving. And somehow they always get, sometimes shaded out for large companies. So how do you bring an ecosystem to its, to bear with its fullest extent, which is local too? And then, for me, outcomes and for Smart North is not about just going in and doing this, but how do you make sure it's data driven, it's outcomes driven, there is an ownership and an accountability to this whole process, or whatever we go in to do as a partnership with the community or the city. And then where is the sustainability of the ownership of that, right? It's just not a one-time thing, it's a continuing thing. And some ways it could be a co-op, some ways it could be city driven. There's so many ways, but there has to be a long-term ownership of these aspects. And then really the last piece where I love Tom and Ben to jump in is our asks. As you shared this with your audience and members, that we are getting to know more now through the Arrowhead and Blandin Foundation webinars. We are looking for like 3 different pieces as Smart North is growing and wants to grow inside of rural Minnesota too. One is we are looking for representation on our advisory board from rural Minnesota, and cities, companies, Blandin Foundation, would welcome any opportunities to partner with entities and organizations and people to be on our advisory board. The second one is, like I said earlier, we are looking to partner with a neighborhood, a city, a community, or a project that is, looking at reinventing some aspects in the Northeastern or Arrowhead region. We are, open to working and looking for projects there. The third part is we wanted to kind of give you a list of examples of what are the kind of initiatives that we think could be relevant. And this is based on at least 2 or 3 webinars that have happened through the Arrowhead Blandin Foundation webinars that we are picking up on that intersect with what we want to do. So this is just not out of the blue, out of our hats, we pulled out these rabbits, but more based on some of these conversations we've been listening into and being a part of. So first one is, like I said, the smart streetlight hubs. And there are many, many examples of this being done successfully across the globe, if not in the country. And so it's the lowest hanging fruit, which we could talk about and work on. The other one, the B and C are 2 areas where I want to jump in a little bit more, because as we were in these webinars, it became very apparent to us that people are hungry for reinventing and reimagining the economic socio-development with the assets that are available in the rural Minnesota today. And 2 things that came up were this community tech support, education co-ops or centers for every neighborhood and every city. And of course, there is a caveat to everything, but which would serve not only in providing education and skill set, access to connectivity and devices, but will address even the job market. So how do you get the youth of rural Minnesota ready for the new job markets that are going to come our way? And it becomes almost like a flywheel effect when you train the kids in middle school in rural Minnesota who can support the community needs and, become interested in STEM and, all of this stuff and make it exciting for them. And then the Tech Innovation Center, there was a lot of conversation on this last Tuesday's webinar about how do we bring entrepreneurship and innovation around new industries or reimagining current industries, right? And lots of examples were shared. So I think that's another area I would be keen on working. And I'd love to have Tom talk about the autonomous vehicle, smart transit work that you and Tom have been leading in Minnesota. So Tom, want to talk about that?
Sure, Sabina. Yes, we're just finishing a 3-year, again, another National Science Foundation grant looking at the impact of autonomous vehicles on improving access to transportation, improving equity related to transportation, as well as smart technology. We've been looking at the infrastructure needs of autonomous vehicles, and a proposal actually that we're working on right now is the idea of having an autonomous vehicle shuttle in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where we would begin to actually deploy autonomous vehicles. And the smart tech hub street lamps idea that Sabina was just talking about turned out to also be really important for the navigation of AVs, autonomous vehicles. And so in addition to being able to deliver high bandwidth access to the internet through our street lamps, they also can really play an important role in our transportation system going forward.
Yeah. Tom, I wanted to bring up the DR4C effort too in mapping the assets and the infrastructure. Would you want to comment on that too? That's very
yeah, we're working as well out in Warren, Minnesota, on a community resilience effort with that community, looking at how they can sort of build on the assets they have. We've been doing a lot of work around greater Minnesota with smaller communities, helping them realize what their competitive advantages are and crafting a future for their communities that may not be necessarily rooted in agriculture. Agriculture will, of course, continue to be an issue, but many of these communities really need to rethink and reimagine themselves in the 21st century. So with Warren, we've been going through that process of identifying their assets and crafting a different vision that would make it an attractive place for people to want to move and to live there. And so it's part of an ongoing effort that we've been doing in various parts of the state. We also worked in Fertile, Minnesota, again, not too far from Warren, on that issue. And we've been working with several communities in Southeast Minnesota as well.
And Ben, I wanted you to kind of talk about the energy efficiency in built environments and the work around that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm with Minify Energy, and we focus on audits and implementation for energy efficient solutions as well as generation. And so a lot of our focus is on commercial buildings, built environment. It's funny you bring up Warren, Tom, because I was with 75F, which is a building automation control solution for HVAC, lighting, and energy. And the campaign that we were running was you don't need to be a big city to be a smart city. Right. And in fact, it's a lot easier to deploy and implement and make a difference on a relatively smaller scale in outstate rural environments and so forth. And Warren is one city where 75F smart building controls were installed in like City Hall and the animal shelter, a few different buildings there to make there's this huge opportunity to make buildings smart in their sensing and their management, so that they're not only energy efficient, but they're healthy, safe environments. There's pandemic mode now built into that software-defined solution that optimizes outside air and gives you occupancy insights as well. So there's quite a bit that you can do. But yeah, so we've done smart building deployments in Warren, International Falls, and other cities around the state. But I think, I kind of look at it from the lens of the smart building enablement, how that fits into the ecosystem of the city, and not just with energy reduction, but with smart sensing, controls, so that you can be more efficient, allocate resources strategically elsewhere when you've got that automation, and you improve the health, wellness, and productivity of your occupants, which is really, the number one reason a building is built is to serve those occupants. So we're really looking at it from smart building and energy and sustainability, at least is a big part of where I'm working on that. I'm also on executive committee of Building Intelligence Group, Twin Cities, which is another group that we can engage as we look at the smart building technologies too.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. So I think that's really the end of our presentation. We are a new organization, eager to start making an impact, and very, very eager to start to do some work and projects in rural Minnesota. So those were our asks, and thank you for this opportunity. As we are building a partnership network, reaching out to Blandin Foundation was one of our biggest to-dos, and we've been fortunate to get engaged, in a very productive manner.
Well, it's fun to hear. It's fun to hear more about it. I know for sure the autonomous vehicles. I hear a lot of people talking about that at the legislature. I hear, and even I think at the broadband task force meeting, they want to talk about that. There's some, it's sexy. There's something about it. Everybody, the idea of it. And so you're talking about starting it in Grand Rapids, or prototyping something in Grand Rapids.
Right.
My limited experience with autonomous vehicles, I think, was on Nicollet Avenue, downtown Minneapolis, just getting kind of a trial run up and down that. What does the city need? And of course, from my angle, I'm always interested, how much broadband do you need? But I really mean it a little bit broader than that. What does that take for a city to try to do something like that?
In terms of autonomous vehicles, or more broadly?
Yeah, just to start with the autonomous vehicles. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, they depend on the internet for their navigation, and so they do. They're GPS based, and so you do need to have that ability to be able to have the vehicles navigate on their own. Of course, they also have a lot of internal technology on the vehicle itself, radar, LiDAR, other kinds of technologies that don't necessarily depend on there being a central control. So they're actually autonomous in their operation. But yeah, I think that one of the ideas about the smart street lamp, the tech hub idea, is that they do need sort of fixed landmarks in order to navigate through the city. So you don't necessarily want to make it that, a tree or a fence post, because the tree can fall down. In other words, you actually want to have navigational landmarks that you are pretty certain are going to be in the same place all the time. So we just think that the street lamp, as Sabina said, is a low-hanging fruit. It's a piece of infrastructure that now does one thing, and it actually can do many things to help us achieve digital equity, digital access, increased mobility, lower costs for that digital access for families. So in sensing technologies that will enable us to have better public safety, to get out ahead of public works issues. So I think there's a whole range of things the smart street lamp can do for us.
I'm appreciating the hours and hours I've spent at my daughter's robotics matches listening to you, because I'm like, oh, okay, now I get that. But I mean, do you have an idea of what kind of broadband the smart lights would need? The lamp posts, the light posts are just we're looking at state goals of 25 down and 3 meg up, and then other state goals of 120. And what broadband wise, what does it take to implement some of this?
Ben, do you want to tackle that?
I don't know that I have the clear answer on that. I do know that there's a variety of different smart hub technologies out there. Some are cellular based currently in terms of nodes that communicate back and forth. I'm forgetting what the throughput is on those, but I think that that's an important consideration as you're looking at, do you need, fiber supply, or can you work off a 5G cellular network? And quite honestly, I haven't done enough from an implementation deployment standpoint to be able to advise the requirements on the autonomous vehicle processing.
So was that question for autonomous vehicles or just for smart street light hubs?
All of the above, yeah.
So there's a whole range of it, right? So smart street lights can range from just LED bulb changes, but what is being talked about now is in the LED fixture, you can actually put 5G nodes, and this could be edge computing, and which goes back to the big towers. So they're all, and everything in between, right? If there is fiber, so if you see in Minneapolis, in my neighborhood, they've put a bunch of these ugly brown poles, which are the 5G kind of poles here, which are really bad looking, but there's nothing else on it. Right. So the idea is, how do you take street lights and make them the hubs and make them, because they have the lights, so they are a little prettier than the rest, but you can have 5G nodes on that. You can have sensors on that. You can attach a lot of stuff. You can have smart kiosks at the bottom of the smart street light hub. People can use that for information. They could be electric vehicle charging stations. So it depends on the use that smart street thing is being put for, but people are talking about just 5G now. I mean, they're saying, let's put 5G nodes and get, access. And like Tom, you were saying that last time, it could be the last mile from a broadband connectivity perspective. You don't even have to run the fiber to the neighborhood because these, 5G nodes could actually do some of that job already.
Well, and that's part of why I ask you. I think one of the things that we're always talking about when we're trying to get 100%, ubiquitous access in Minnesota is that you need some kind of connectivity through the whole farm, not just in the farm building. You need it on all of it to take care of some of the precision ag and some of that. So it's, having ways that brings the fiber, the nirvana, whether it's attainable or not, is fiber to the home at some point, but even getting the fiber to the street lamp and going from there, that's getting it one hop closer. And you need to have that wireless connectivity for an autonomous car. Yeah. And I think it's not any, not any either, but it's nice to think that it's, you build the case that you need better broadband, and you need better broadband to make the case that we want to do all of these things. They very much go hand in hand.
Yeah, and now, with all the way that we use our cell phones, for example, video calls with our doctors, or our kids having actually full school online, it's, you need that. It's all video based, all the time. We need that broadband. So it's not a if it's good to have, it's going to become a need to have. The other example I wanted to give you on the broadband is, like, I work, my company works with university campuses, right? So the telecom providers there put these small cells right on the top of the buildings. They don't have towers near every campus, but then those campuses become actually, for the entire community or a big part of the city, they become the kind of the center of that, connectivity. So that's another piece. There are now smart towers coming up. There's a company out of Chicago who's doing smart towers that gives you a mile of Wi-Fi, which is free. And these telecom companies put their cellular boxes inside those inside those towers. They are beautiful looking towers. They can be branded. They can have advertising, smart kiosks, all of that stuff. So there is plethora of opportunities around these smart street hubs and broadband.
Well, it'll be fascinating when I look forward to when you're talking to people even outside of the rural towns, because that's kind of that there's those donut areas where they have the coverage is very poor. You go a mile, 2 miles outside of the town. So anything that, again, it's the balance of anything that makes the case that you need better broadband is helpful. And with the chicken and the egg, but yeah, you need the broadband to make the case that you need, so it's exciting to think of coming up with applications that will really make sense to some of that,
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
I think of, you have places where there are 2 homes per square mile, and what are the applications that they're going to be able to use something like this for. And then one of the things that you said early on is that you're really looking for transformational change.
Right.
I think it's an amazing time because because of the pandemic, because of the civil unrest, and now because of, as I said, just this week, the temperature changes. We're fine in Minnesota, we're used to it, but you look and see what's happening in other parts of the world, and people are having to rebuild. So it does make sense to have folks like you in the room coming from, you don't want your energy people working on this and your, electricity and, the broadband working on this and the education working on that. It just seems like you're in a good place to be building from the ground to some degree.
Yeah, and the bigger challenge though is in the transformational effort is what is built, how do we make that better? Because there's only so much you can do. You can't raise the buildings to the ground or rebuild a city. If you're building a city, it's I would say it's transformational, but it's easier because you're building from scratch. The bigger challenge is that how do you take current environments and make them better and transformational and more productive and all of that good stuff. So, and that's excitement really around the challenge that we've taken upon ourselves is we have to transform livability irrespective, whether you're in an urban environment or any other environment, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, to that point, I mean, the cost to build a building is about 5% of the total cost of its lifetime. Most of it's the operations over. So it's a matter of planning and not value engineering out those technologies and data enablement that will serve beyond the couple of years of development and flip, but have a multi-decade view for use. And then similarly, we keep going back to the streetlight hub concept, but if you're looking at that for more than just public works and energy reduction and lighting quality, but also thinking about other services such as emergency response or parks, and how do all of the different workflows and stakeholder priorities fit into that, so that you're not building point solutions. It's a politically charged, but shot spotter technology, urban environments, that those are being built out on their own, wherein they could be incorporated as just one of hundreds of different applications on a platform environment that's spread across the infrastructure if it's planned well and thought through and involves the different stakeholder groups and city services.
But you said it's always there are always new challenges with legacies. I mean, I do enough tech work to know that, but sometimes you got to stick with it. You got to stick with the buildings that you have. But now we're in a unique position, I think, to come up with entire new purposes. Yes. We've just had to rethink how we've worked in the last year.
Right, and the low cost of sensors and mesh networks, and and bringing fiber and then edge compute, all of those things are coming together for an affordable perfect storm to enable a lot of functionality that was never there. And we didn't talk that much about data use, but in addition to transportation, energy, public safety, digital access and equity, the use of data, access and leverage of that data for the betterment of the community, the citizens, factoring privacy and as well as city services and public-private collaboration are all really exciting areas to look at from the that last point in the engagement process in terms of how is the data leveraged. And to Tom's point, it can be used for business intelligence and artificial intelligence informing emergency response and several other instances.
Well, one of the things that we haven't mentioned is that we're creating this video now, but on March 24th, the Blandin Lunch Bunch is going to be on smart cities, smart technology. So that's a chance where people can come in with their own questions. And just thinking about if you had the opportunity to go into a rural community, who would be your dream team walking in there? Who are you looking to participate, to step up and say, I'm interested?
Yeah, I don't know, Ben, if you have any thoughts there, but I am wanting to go through the webinars that we have been attending. That's one way of educating ourselves, that who are the organizations and entities who are stepping up for those conversations and getting engaged. They are our partners, and we are making a list of those folks. So truly, it has been a very valuable learning experience.
Nice.
And getting engaged, because the conversation is happening now, right? And we are talking about this now. So it's a perfect storm from that perspective. So we will have a list of folks ready for you, and if you want that.
Oh, well, and I'm even just thinking what kind of folks, I assume like the schools that,
Yeah. So public, city representation and leadership, certainly. I mean, we're trying to identify where there's a need and an interest and an appetite to do something. So, from a city perspective, representation across city leadership, but also we're interested in identifying what's going on with private entrepreneurs and companies and technologies that are being deployed, and understanding who's in our ecosystem throughout the state that we can engage and raise the visibility of as we look at the capabilities that we have in our resources and workforce here in Minnesota. And then I guess we're also interested in people who have done deployments, because we're trying to identify and tell the best practice, case study, or lessons learned if it's not best practice the first time around, to get that feedback from those who have deployed. So we're really, as an organization, we're interested in the public leadership, but also the private contributors and citizen representation. Tom and Sabine, I'll let you chime in there.
I would add, universities, and Tom, you can speak to that more. And the community colleges. They were on the webinar. There were a couple of community colleges, because that would also become a source of internships and skill building and pulling students into the kind of projects we are doing. And they have a starting point. There's a lot of IP coming out of that, which is not so there's a nice intersection point there. Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a colleague of mine, Jacob Manns, we're starting a rural design lab where the University of Minnesota is partnering with Minnesota State colleges and tech colleges to sort of join forces to develop new entrepreneurial activities in greater Minnesota. Jacob is working around housing, new kinds of housing technologies that can restart local economies and provide more housing for communities that need it. But I think there's a whole range of opportunities there. Minnesota is really fortunate because we have both one of the top research universities in the country, combined with an incredible network of community and technical colleges and state universities that are very close to, they're distributed around the state, close to most people. And so the more that these two systems can work together with local communities on new technologies, I think the better we'll all be.
Well, that's fantastic. I know one of the things that came up on one of the calls, one of the Airhead calls earlier this week, was kind of the idea of tech transfer. And years ago, I worked for an organization that did a lot of tech transfer. I think if there was an ability to fast track things coming out of the university and things coming out of the community colleges and getting them on the main street, I just think that would, I think you guys are in an awesome position to facilitate that and help make that happen.
Right.
Yeah, they talked about the lack of the ability to commercialize a lot of that IP and good work coming out of that, Tom. So we were talking about having Techstars, like the Techstars Food Ag division is in the Twin Cities in St. Paul, and I'm saying, okay, they could be sitting actually in Northeast Minnesota with another branch there, because there's so much innovation that can happen around agricultural waste or other stuff, downstream products. So very interesting. That's why this whole innovation hub kind of thing, tech innovation hub kind of conversation happened post that. So yeah, and you're right. There's lots of opportunity and there's lots of assets already sitting there. We just need to harness some of them.
That's right.
Well, and it's a funny time, a very good friend, very good techie friend just moved up to Grand Marie. I think it's a time where people are looking to, because you don't need to necessarily stay in the same place. And, you can keep your job and move to a different area, so
Sure.
why not the reverse? Why not start it from these different areas?
There was a gentleman on one of the webinars. He did a research recently for IRB, and there was a statistic that he quoted. I forget the percentage, but there has been a influx of people who are moving from the Twin Cities into the Northeast Minnesota, and because they feel like they can work from anywhere, it's better for their families and it's less stressful, and it's just a better place to be in. So, can that be a impetus towards housing and innovation and all the other work that we want to do?
Yeah.
That. Wow.
Well, exciting. So I invite folks who have found this conversation interesting to join us on March 24th, and we'll talk about smart technology in a broader sense. But I'm hoping you guys will be there and to try to talk a little bit about this, because it's fun to just think of things differently. And we have the time to think of things a little bit differently, because we have to think of things a little bit differently. But as you said, making good use of what's already there is a smart way to do it.
And if not now, then when, right? So I think from a variety of reasons, I would like to say, if not us, then who? But I'll just stop and say, even if we can just shine a light on this, I think that's a big step forward on its own, because people are ready to see stuff in a very different light. So,
I think that's they've just had to. The idea more than a year ago that people would be okay with having Zoom calls only. No, we've tried to add an online component to our annual conference for years and years and years. No, necessity, mother of invention here, and mother of innovation. So I think that it is possible. I mean, it is, to getting over that that's got to be the fastest learning curve for a people, to learn how to use some of that. So
I'm almost thinking like, when you plot the big revolutions that changed our lives, industrial revolution, and then the internet happened, and then this happened. I'm just thinking that this pandemic year is going to see that, upward curve in how transformation is going to change our lives. And it'll be, of course, tech driven, but it's left to our imagination. We already know some of the low hanging stuff, but there's so much more to come. Don't you agree, Ben and I just see that as this is going to be, in the history as not just the pandemic year, but
yeah, no, it really accelerated a trend that was already underway, and just I'm sure it's swung too far, and we'll come back to a hybrid where there's just like operational technology and information technology. There's definitely an appetite for people to get back together in person, trade show exhibits and so forth. We know we're going to see those things come back, but I think we're going to see an accelerated growth and adoption of the remote work, remote office, and digitization, more so than we would have without 2020 in our lives.
Absolutely.
And we're catching up with the Gen Zs, Ys, and whatever comes after.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there'll be an assumption that there will be a way to participate in the world remotely, even after this. Not that everybody wants to, and not that everybody wants to every day, but now that we've learned that we can, suddenly my broken leg isn't going to keep me from watching the basketball game. I mean, that's an old story from Broadband world, but it just takes it to another degree. So it's, I think if not now, when? It's so all right, March 24th. Thank you so much for sharing all this information, and we'll get this. We'll see you next month.
Excellent. Thanks for your time.
And I will see you next month. Bye-bye.